Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we are in episode 82 and part 3 of our Level Up review.
Yeah, part 3 of our 10X rule by Grant Cardone. And we're finishing it. We're going to finish it today.
We 10X this Level Up review.
Yeah, we should actually go 10 more episodes. We said it was going to take 2, so we're going to do this in 20 episodes to cover it thoroughly.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, by that time, I think we'll have like 10 listeners for the 20th episode. Because here's what's happening. So with this book, there are some valuable insights if you go to the end, which we're going to talk about today. But, you know, you kind of get the gist, I would say, in the beginning. And then he elaborates on it. And there's good stuff. So if you've picked up the book and you only read like the first 10 chapters, I encourage you to read it through. And I would say towards the end, we'll talk about that. I don't know. How many does he have? He has about like 30 different items. Like,
yeah. I mean, it really, I kind of say like it's just a re-explanation of everything you talked about before, just more condensed and concise. But yeah, like 30 different things that are keys of successful people as opposed to people who are unsuccessful.
Well, I think it's if, let's say you did like a Google search, how to be successful, and every keyword that would show up on that Google search, like he broke down into 30 something different items.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. With that, is a sense of let's get moving. All right.
Let's do this.
So where are we, Mike?
So we're picking up on chapter 13, and we're just going to kind of go through this. If you haven't listened to our first 2 episodes, I would highly recommend you go back and do that, even if you didn't read the book, because honestly, there's a lot of key takeaway things that I was able to get from this. One of the things we talked about last time, and I'm interested to see, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but did you write down your goals every day like I told you to, at least one goal?
Like
we agreed to it.
You told me to. We agreed to.
Yeah,
now,
that's what
I did think about this 5 days ago, and I thought I should start writing my goals because I'm pretty sure Mike hasn't. And I didn't do it.
I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
You did? Every day?
Every day.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, I guess I don't have that discipline.
And it works. It worked. I mean, it worked in the sense of...
Now, were your goals, Gordon and Grant Cardone, unrealistic goals?
No. Okay, so I that wasn't part of the agreement. I didn't say it had to be that crazy, but I did set a goal, and part of it is life is different now, a little more busy with, having a family and job and all these things that I don't get to read as much as I'd like to. I do lots of podcasts for like educational reasons and like self-improvement and all of that. But like actual sit down and reading like intellectually stimulating material I haven't been able to make a lot of time for that. So every night before I'd go to bed, I'd write down, tomorrow I'm going to read. I didn't do it the Grant Cardone style of like, I read for 45 minutes, but I would just put like, I will read for 45 minutes. And I did it. I woke up a half hour earlier and I read for a half hour. And then at night after my son went to bed, I'd read for another 15, 20 minutes and it worked. So part of it was because every night I'd write that down. And if I hadn't read the 45 minutes, it's like, well, I guess I better read because, I wrote that down. So it does keep it in the forefront of your mind that you've got something. Because if I were to just write it down once and then a week later be like, oh yeah, I stopped doing that. Right. But if you're writing it down every day, so I'd say that was beneficial. You should try it.
Well, okay. So let's do this. So this is Orlando attempting this part 2. Why don't I do this before our next Level Up review?
All right.
Starting tomorrow.
Cool.
So tomorrow before, when we're recording this, it's a Friday night before garage sales.
Yeah.
So I got to figure out a time because Saturday, it's crazy. Saturday is my busiest day of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Which is miserable to me in the sense that I remember Saturday, I couldn't find, like, I love what I do. Don't get me wrong. But I remember Saturday, I miss the days of being bored. I mean, I do and I don't, but you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like when you're a kid and it's summer and if you don't have a job and your friends are like on vacation or wherever and it's just you alone at home, like summer can be miserable.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how. So now Saturday, I would say Saturday and Sunday are super intense days for me, reselling wise.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the game. And, it's one of those things where we can't really complain too much about it because, if we want to be successful, we got to go all in and overcommit.
No, agreed.
Which is chapter 13.
No, and this was inspiring because I'm in this mode I've mentioned before on the podcast where after I thought I'm going to go hard for 1 year. And then after last Q4, I thought, no, I need to do another year. And so reading this, I'm like, yep, I need to. Like he mentions later on in the book about, the time for vacation, someone will be there. And I do. I mean, I went probably on 3-4 vacation trips after Q4 last year. But right now, I haven't been sleeping much, and it's because I've been all in and overcommitting the last week.
That's good. I mean, you've got to do that. And one of the things he says that I thought was pretty interesting, he compares life, people love to use different metaphors and analogies and stuff, but he kind of compares it to poker. And, if you've ever watched the Texas Hold'em tournaments, or if you ever played that kind of poker, you know that one of the big things that happens in like those crazy moments is the all in, the push in, right? Where one player just puts it all on the line, they push all their chips in, and it's like, if I win this, I'm set. I'm either going to win this game or I'm going to be so far ahead. And if I lose, I'm walking away, I'm done, right? And that's a scary thing. But he's kind of arguing with this all in mentality is go all in with your mind and with your actions and with your attitude. And he goes, what's the worst that's going to happen? He says you fail, but unlike in poker, you still have your mind and your actions, and you can go all in again, and you can go all in again. And so unlike the poker where you go all in, you push in, and then you lose and you're done, you walk away from the table. His thing is, who cares? You lose that time, go all in the next time. Just keep going all in. You never stop. You never lose. And it says here, the most valuable chips you have are your mindset, actions, persistence, and creativity. You go all in with the energy as many times as you want, because even if you fail, you can keep going all in.
Yes, but I think there needs to be some kind of wisdom when you go all in. I think about that. I think about if I said, I'm going to go in, and maybe it's because I always say this, I don't know if I'm an entrepreneur. I definitely can resell. But as far as, I have savings and I have different, I would say safety measures in case things go bad. But I don't know if I'd be willing to just cash out everything. You know what I mean? Like, what if I went all in and just said, this Q4, I am going to kill it. And I'm going to use all my savings. I'm going to go 100K in debt. Like, I'm going to go all out. I can't do it.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that you're finally, I don't want to say finally, but you're the one kind of pushing back a little bit more, because I feel like overall you're the little bit more like, I don't want to say you're on Grant Cardone's side on a lot of this stuff, but you kind of see the value of his mindset. But here you're pushing back a little, and I think that's good, because I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I like the sentimentality of going all in, but I think it has to be restrained, and I like the idea of it being your mindset. But in some way, your mindset has to connect with your actions, right? So you can be all in your mindset of like, I'm going to make this work, but you've got to literally put your money where your mouth is, and if you're going all in on something, you've got to invest. And so I do think there's a place of, can you go all in with like a positive attitude, with like, I'm going to give it my energy? Maybe that's the thing that we could say, like, maybe you don't go all in on your resources unless you're 100% certain. You don't go all in with, everything, but with your energy and like focus and the mental aspect, maybe you can go all in for a day, a week, a month on something. And if it fails, oh, well, you didn't necessarily lose capital except for the opportunity cost.
Well, it's just something you got to think about. We keep saying this, you got to find the model that works for you, but it's true. It's one of the things that really annoyed me one time. I remember watching Gary Vee was doing he was reading his book, one of his books for an Audible. And he said something to the fact, if you have a job, you're not an entrepreneur. And I go, wow, okay, so that means that if you at any time take any kind of safety precaution, right? So let's say, the economy is bad, and you have a spouse and you have kids and you're an entrepreneur. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to take the safe road, I'm going to get a job with benefits to ensure that my family's taken care of, that you're not an entrepreneur. And I go, okay, I guess I'm not. It bothered me, but I guess I just couldn't. To me and myself, I would view myself as less of a person if I couldn't provide for the needs of my family than if I just decided to take a job and just, eat crow.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's interesting. The other day I posted on Instagram how I wish I knew about reselling earlier on, because years ago, before my first son was born, I took a job at In-N-Out Burger, and it was miserable. I mean, I got to tell you, like, anytime I've taken a job that was a job to make money, I hated it. If it was teaching, I loved it. When I was administrator, I loved it. Reselling, I loved it. But I worked at Shopko for a while. I worked at Target. That was kind of fun, but it was more of a job to pay the bills. And that job was pretty miserable. I can't say I ever went into work going, yes, I want to wear that bib every day, and I want to, be embarrassed when parents roll up to the window putting their order. Like I didn't enjoy it. But anyways, I say all that because if it came down to it and I needed to do that, I would do it. And so I don't know if I fit this model.
And I think that's right. And I think that's an okay place to be, because when you're hearing from somebody like Grant Cardone or Gary Vee, and they're talking about the ultra successful, and they're talking about the 1% of the 1%, like I can't remember what the law is called, but there's kind of this concept that it's like less than 10% of people, of products or whatever is successful. And then of that, so like, let's say, Beethoven, right? Like he's obviously in like the 1% elite of musicians that people still know today. But of his music that he produced, only 10% of that is even known, right? So like even of the best, only a little bit makes it. And so I think the idea is to be at that caliber, those people have to be the ones that do go all in with everything. And if you got to realize that this isn't a guaranteed success. Like if you go that far all in to be successful, you might have a 1 in 1,000 shot of making it. But if you don't go all in, you might have a 1 in a million shot of making it to that level, right? So is it a guarantee? No. But
I don't think Cardone argues that.
But I mean,
Cardone's just like, you go all in, you're going to make it.
Yeah. I mean,
that's true.
Well, and that's true because that's what he's selling, right? Like you're not going to, if you were like literally being 100% transparent to your customers and saying like, hey, you probably shouldn't buy my book because chances are like the fact of this actually working for you is like 1 in a million. But like if you read it, it's 1 in a million. If you don't, it's 1 in 2 million. So, but like chances are this isn't going to work for you. Your money might be better spent. Like you're not going to, but if you're like, here's what you can do, you got to make it. I think the benefit of this kind of mentality is, and this goes back to, and this might be a little too philosophical, but I heard one time, and
we're still on chapter 13, by the way.
Yeah, we'll blaze through these. We'll just do like titles. But I heard, because I was interested about literature, right? I'm an English teacher. And I've tried my hand when I was in college, like I'm going to be a creative writer. And so I tried some writing and it just wasn't for me, right? Like that's not my skill. And I learned through like literary theory that the people who write novels and poems and plays that are impactful and powerful and that people know about are the people who experience life to such an extreme that they can explain it in a way that the average person can experience it like as if it's real, right? Whereas if you experience life the way a normal person experiences it, you can never explain it in a way that other people would feel it. So it kind of goes to that same idea that Grant Cardone is so extreme and he has to give so much extreme, like raw in his book. But because the average person, and I know he hates the idea of average, but the average person who reads this isn't going to go as extreme as he is saying to go, but they might improve their like action by 10%.
But see, I think
that makes a difference.
But I think we're proving Grant Cardone right. Because I think what we're saying is if you want to be that 1%, you have to go all in like the 1%.
Yeah.
Like so if you're reserved, you're going to stay reserved.
Yeah.
So we're just validating what Grant Cardone is saying. And so, which kind of bothers me because
the only thing I think is different though is he doesn't throw in the caveat of, but it's unlikely you'll make it.
Yeah, but you can't have that mindset. If you want to level up, if you want a 10x, you have to 10x. There is no reservations.
I think you have to live like there's no reservations, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying like, hey, I'm putting it all on the line here. I'm going 100% because this is the only way I'm going to break into that next level. But there's a chance I'm going to fail at this. Like,
no,
I think that's okay.
Not according to 10x. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you're wrong or right. I'm just saying to 10x, there is no, but it's just no, you're taking action. And so you got to choose. I'm kind of in a place where I look at this and I go, you know what? Maybe I need to be a little less reserved. I mean, I will tell you, I've done that multiple times in my life and it's panned out. But, there's always, and he talks about this later on, there's that fear. So One thing I will say though, one thing I want to get out of this chapter before we move on is, he talks about what's the worst thing that can happen to you if you just totally go for it. You may lose a customer, but so what? You still have unlimited resources to give it all with your next client. You have everything gained and nothing to lose. And then he goes on, next page 101. You need new problems. There are signs that you're making progress and heading in the right direction. I think we covered some of this last time. Most people simply never bother to perform, instead spend their time trying to wrap their heads around things that may never happen for them. Anyone who doesn't face new problems, but who instead grapples with the same old problems, is their whole life isn't moving forward. Simply put, if you're not creating new problems for yourself, then you aren't taking enough action. And I think that's part of it. I think if you go all in, if you end up broke and you never were broke, that's a new problem. So maybe that's what it takes.
Hey.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. So anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, almost every successful success story, almost every success story has the phase of life where the person was, eating top ramen and living in their car and,
Well, even Dave Ramsey, who I would say Dave Ramsey and Grant Cardone are not polar opposites, but very different, right? Mm-hmm. Grant Cardone's like, don't own your own house.
Right.
Dave Ramsey's very much. Grant Cardone is like, who cares about savings? Mm-hmm. As from my understanding, Dave Ramsey all about savings, right? Very opposed. But Dave Ramsey himself, I think twice he went broke before he ever made it to the next level.
Yeah, and what they share in common is the extreme stance they take on taking action, right? Just the type of action is different.
Correct. Gazelle intensity,
right?
And 10x.
Yep.
Right, but you gotta be intense, so I'm looking at this and going, okay, well maybe you just find again what works for you and you figure that out. I'm going like maybe I'm too reserved.
Yeah, and I think the wise thing and what I take out of this is this is inspiring. Like I was saying, like getting from somebody who lives so much more intense than I could ever imagine living allows me to up my intensity a little bit. And for me, that's enough, right? Like being a little bit more like, yeah, I'm going to get it. And like, I do 10% more in my work and I do 10% better in my family and I do 10% better on my finances and 10% better, physically and 10% better spiritually, like all of those things. It's like, hey, that was a win. Right. And so, yeah, it's not what Grant Cardone is asking, but realistically, if that's all the average, person gets out of it, that's still a win. And I think that's why so many people flock to these types of books is, living vicariously through this like action, even though you only take a little bit and you're like, I can't really follow all of it. But the wise thing to say is, even though I can't do that, man, the motivation behind it is like, it's enough. Like that was worth the price of the book.
Yeah. My only question is, and I'm just throwing this out, just for our listeners to think about and you to think about, do we sometimes disguise fear with wisdom? Like we say wisdom, but is that really fear? Right. And so we're using the word wisdom and replacing it. I mean, we're not using the word fear. We're replacing it with wisdom because we're scared to go all in and move forward.
I think that might be the case sometimes, but I think it's dangerous just to make that blanket statement because yeah, I think you could say that with anything, right? Like, hey, here's this person who's got this trinket and they're willing to sell you $10,000 worth of them. And you might be able to make a huge killing off it if this ends up being the thing that takes off, right? And it's like, well, should I invest my entire life savings on this item? Well, fear.
No, I know. And I think there's
might be wisdom
situations for all of it. I'm just throwing the question out there is because I wonder myself, like sometimes I say, well, I don't know if that would be the wise thing to do. And I go, well, no, maybe I'm just scared. And I'm trying to use the word wisdom so I feel better and I sleep better at night.
I'm a big fan of writing out a pro and con list. Like I've made multiple big decisions. Me and my wife together made handful of like huge life decisions, moving, job changes, things like that. And every single time we take out a pad of paper and we spend like a couple hours and we sit down and we write down every positive thing that can come from it, every negative thing that can come from
cost
it.
Benefit.
And then we read them several times. And then we ask, like, okay, these negative things, is it worth these positive? Right. And that I think is at that point, whatever decision you make, you can't say like, well, it's just fear. Because if you do that legitimately, you're making the wisest choice you can make given the knowledge that you have. Right. So I do think if you just say no without spending the time to think about it, that's not wise.
My question to that though is there a possibility that your cons are based on fear?
It could be. And that's why, you should probably seek out some wise counsel too and have some outside people who are, not necessarily as impacted by the decision, run it by them. Like, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I've thought.
But then it depends on who you ask to, right?
Well,
you ask an entrepreneur, they're going to say, go for it, right? You ask the individual who's been a loyal employee at a place for 9 to 5, that's the way they roll. Like, they may say, no, think about your benefits. Think about this, think about that. I don't have the answer. I'm just throwing the questions out for all of you to answer, for yourselves.
Oh, that's very helpful.
Well, no, but that's the thing here. I mean, this is part of the reason we do these book studies is, we look at them and we go, okay, there's some great ideas here. There's some ideas that you should think about. And then there's some things that we're like, I don't even know if this is even worth the conversation.
But you turned the conversation to, how do you know whether decisions are wise or fear? And your response or your answer is, well, you just don't know. It could be fear.
I can't speak for someone. I will say for myself, now that I'm 40, which I'm not that old, but I would say a lot of decisions I didn't make, they weren't based on wisdom. I used wisdom as my cover, but a lot of times it was just fear.
No.
Right? I mean, right now I could be in a whole different place as a reseller, could be in a whole different place as, as creators, whatever you want to call it, because we just chose not to make decisions that would have taken us to the next level because we wanted to be wise, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean,
air quotes. So,
all right. And that kind of brings into the next chapter, which is expand, never contract. And he's really talking about this idea of like, when there's a recession, when people become defensive, his idea is don't become defensive. That's the time to go on the attack. That's the time to really up your game. And I've always said that specifically with like stocks. Oftentimes the market, people react to fear, right? And they move with the direction the market is going. And historically, pulling your money out of the market completely as the market is going down is a terrible idea. Historically, the best thing you can do is to continue pumping as much money as you can into it, even as it's making its way down. Because on the rebound, the value that you get off of each dollar you put into it goes up because you're buying things at a discounted price. You're buying a stock at a discounted
it's like
price.
reselling, buy low, sell high.
Exactly. So oftentimes though, people move with the fear, and in a recession or when the market's going down, it's like, well, Apple has gone down 30%, so I'm going to sell all my Apple stock, instead of the people say, well, I believe in the company and I think that Apple's going to be around 10 years from now. So instead of selling all of my Apple stock, it's at a 30% discount. I'm going to keep buying more. And then it's like, oh, it went down another 10%. So I just lost a lot of money that I put in. So I'm going to buy even more because now it's even more discounted.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speak too much on stocks. I just don't think I will say personally, I don't have enough experience. I mean, I've dealt with stocks, but not enough to say, hey, this is the way you should do it. That's just where I land.
Yeah, you're being very cautious there. I'm saying historically, that's the wise thing to do.
It's historically, yeah, I would say yeah. I mean,
and that's what Grant
I know people that when Apple was really low and they eventually did really well, because who knew that the iPhone would take everything, or the iPod would take everything.
Well, yeah, and that's talking about something different. That's like speculating on whether or not like
but they bought earlier on. Like they bought in 99, they bought in 2000 when things weren't, when the things weren't going well.
But that's not the same thing though as like an entire market.
Oh no,
recession.
I get what you're saying. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So this idea in chapter 14 is when things are getting worse, as fewer customers seem to be on the market, as people tend to be saving as opposed to spending, because whether it's interest
I agree with you there. I mean, that's what I've always been saying. I'm waiting for things to happen. Like right now, I'm in savings mode, right? But yeah, when the economy hits, I mean, you think about as a reseller, all that will be available to you. You think about if you finally want to land on real estate, it's during a recession, right? We live in San Diego. There's no way I will buy anything right now while the economy is still rising. It's still, I mean, unemployment is at the lowest rate it's been in 50 years. But I'm telling you, when that recession hits, yes, I think we're 100% agreed. Yep. It's time to buy.
Yeah, and to finish up this chapter, the Grant Cardone saying is, I would rather die in expansion than die in contraction. I would rather fail pushing forward than in retreat.
Yeah,
I love that. I should add some like epic music in the background with like fireworks.
You should have brought your microcord. All right, chapter 15. So it's kind of some of this. So I'm working on this. I don't think we're ever going to get this right, but it's all good.
Mic awareness.
So on page 110, he shares, he's talking about, again, burn the place down. Again, it's about overcommitment. It's kind of the same theme, right? So we can kind of fly through some of this. But he says, I do believe that you must stay committed to taking action. Even after achieving successes along the way, continue to take more actions in order to exceed your goals. The time to celebrate or take vacations will come. Right now, you must keep adding wood until the fire is burning so hot that no one and nothing can put out your successes. And I agree. I think complacency is someone's demise. Has been my demise. I would say in this last year, I've come to realize, I got to a place where I'm like, all right, I can sell full time. I can pay the bills. But then it was like, wait, then I need to I need to take care of this. I need to take care of this. And complacency led to me losing ground. Right, where I should have just been expanding my business. I should have just been looking at other avenues for more streams of income, and instead I was happy with it. That's why I'm saying I'm throwing in another year, and maybe I'll be saying the same thing 10 years from now. I don't know. I mean, maybe you get.
So are you hoping to get to a place where you've worked so hard that you're not having to work so hard?
No, I'm looking so I can diversify.
Okay.
Right. So in the sense I've always shared with this that my next step is real estate. Right. Not because we read Grant Cardone. That's always been the thing because trends can come and go. Different commodities can come and go. But the one thing that people always have needed since the beginning of mankind has been land. Always. Right. Unless we can figure out some way to live digitally somewhere else. You know what I mean? Or we start. We get really obnoxious here. Like, Elon Musk begins, cultivating the moon.
Which even still, can you imagine the price of real estate on the moon?
Well, yeah, I get that. Or, domain names is something that people talk about. But ultimately, people need places to live. And that's why I'm saying I want to go hard another year. And here's the thing. I thought by now we'd be in a recession and we're not. Right? So you just got to... You just got to keep making that money and just waiting.
Keep making that money. I like that. All right.
I don't like saying that. It sounds, you got to keep making that money, but money isn't everything. Money's just one ROI.
It's a tool. It's a tool that you can use to allow for other things in your life.
I guess so. That's what you
have anything else you want to say on chapter 15?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. So, all right, let's move on.
All right, chapter 16.
We talked about this.
Fear is the great indicator. And he takes an interesting approach on this. And I want to say two things. One is, if you have never seen Will Smith's video on fear,
it's so good.
It's amazing, right? Like where he talks about like he was going to jump out of airplane and the amount of fear that he experienced all the way. And he kind of just explained like how fear is so debilitating for no reason. Like there's nothing... Anyways, I'm not even going to try and explain it. I could spend the time to break it down, but watch it. Just type in Will Smith fear. It's a great YouTube video.
Just put the link in.
Yeah, I'll put the link down below. Tell Will Smith we sent you. No, I'm just kidding. But he took an interesting approach in that he, instead of just like talking about fear, like his thing is, if there's fear, if you experience any fear, that is the indicator to go act on the fear. Like,
okay,
don't even hesitate.
So I think we're thinking the same thing. So we've talked about before, and I've mentioned before, where I wish I went with my gut, right, on certain things. But if my gut is saying no, is that fear or is that intuition that's protecting me?
Nah, I don't know. I'm not going to talk about intuition and gut and all that stuff.
But it's the same thing, right? I mean, if you have, it's this scenario. You ever had those instances, and maybe you haven't, but I've had a couple scenarios where I just thought, maybe I don't need to go to this location. And then something crazy happened at that place. It wasn't like anything newsworthy, but it was just like, so glad that I just followed my gut and I didn't go, right? And I'm glad I didn't go into this business venture because, had I gone into it, I would have lost $10,000. Right. And so that's where I struggle with this, because he says on page 116, use this frequently. Avoided feeling as a green light to signal you to what you should do. So you get that feeling of, hey, I don't know if I should do this. go for it. Like that's tough.
It's reckless. And
you think it's reckless? I don't know if it's reckless.
no, it's 100% reckless.
You think so?
Yeah, because you just talked about the difference between wisdom and fear. And so we were kind of insinuating that you should base your decisions off of wisdom and not fear. And that we could sometimes be afraid, which is why we don't do things. But then at the same time, like the idea, I mean, it's one of those things that like he can just say it, but really it's a nuanced and very complicated issue is when you start talking about like fear. There's so many examples of like, I'm afraid to do this thing. Well, unless you actually break down like pros and cons and decide like, is this worth the risk? But if you're just like, oh man, quitting my job, I don't know. I'm afraid to do it because I don't know if I'll be able to provide for my family.
Then you should quit right now.
That's it. I quit. Like I'm just gonna do it because that's what Grant Cardone is suggesting, and maybe not to that extreme, but it is.
I keep saying maybe we're not the definition of entrepreneurs.
But even still, like an entrepreneur would be afraid of failure. An entrepreneur would be afraid of sleeping in when the thing, you know what I mean? Like I'm afraid to sleep in when the business partners are out doing this, and I might be missing this deal. So you know what? I'm sleeping in. Like you got to draw the line. Like eventually, like okay, so you're only talking about fear about taking action. Well, what kind of action? Fear about taking action that could lead to benefit. Well, then at that point, that's not all types of fear, right? So you got to be very specific about saying like, if you're afraid of taking action because it could be uncomfortable, but there's a chance of success and a pretty high chance of success, then I could see where he's coming from. But if it's just all fear, that doesn't make sense.
Okay, moving on.
All right.
I just that one lost me a little bit. All right. I did love the next chapter though, the myth of time management. I agree with it. I think it's a myth.
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Explain.
I 100% believe you can manage your time.
I think you can. No. Okay, but that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is it's a myth because you somehow believe that you have to give up. Like we've kind of talked about this, that and we've come to an agreement that you do have to give up certain things, right? If you want to go to a certain place. But what he's saying is that as long as everybody's on board, you can still prioritize, and you don't have to make it a time management thing. You can have it be something that your whole family's on board with something, and you could definitely make it happen where time isn't an issue anymore.
Well, yeah, but that comes down to this idea of the main thing I have a problem is he says this. He says, I personally am not interested in balance. I'm interested in abundance in every area. And that's talking on both sides. Like I think when some people say balance, they're not saying that they want like mediocre everything. Like I don't know anybody who says I want balance. I want like a work-life balance. When they say that, and I get that people say like that's a myth, and I understand this is like really, you've got to go into a lot of details to talk about exactly what define all your terms, right? But most people when they say they want work-life balance, they're saying I want to be able to be very successful at work and I want to be very successful at home. I want to have a good family connection and I want to be able to do well in my business. I want to be able to do well with my, physical goals. I want to do well with my intellectual or emotional goals. They're not saying, I just want to be average in everything. I want to be the lowest low. Like that's not what, so when he says he wants abundance in every area, that's the balance people are talking about.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I agree with what he's saying. Because he's saying you can have abundance in all of it.
But what he's saying is that's the myth, that people who want like a balance, life balance, that's a myth. Instead, you can have abundance in everything. Well, that's what they want. So he's saying the myth is the very thing that's not the myth. You see what I'm saying? Like it's like a circular logic. Like he says, if you think people who want time management for work-life balance, that's a myth. You can actually have it all. Well, that's the work-life balance.
But he's saying that you don't need a balance. Like there isn't like you got to have 60-40 or 70-30 or 50-50. He's saying you could have 100-100.
That math doesn't work that way.
No, the math doesn't work that way. But I truly believe if people on board. I mean, how many times have we talked? People actually, somebody had addressed. We feel bad. Somebody had actually contacted us at one point about concerns because their partner wasn't on board with their reselling, right? And we need to get back to that person. My apologies if you listen to the podcast. We'll get back to you. We don't offer counseling, by the way. So what we're gonna say
maybe we should
is no, not at all. But
Dear Pure Hustle Podcast,
that would be a definitely different turn for the podcast.
So yeah, if you guys have suggestions and you want to hear non-legal and non-psychological advice
or anyway,
we're not professionals, but we can definitely fix all of your life problems. Send in your questions.
But I lost my train of thought now with that silliness. Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, okay. So a significant other isn't on board, right? And I think about that. I think, I know a couple right now that they're both on board with reselling. And so to them, work-life balance doesn't matter. It's not an issue. Like they can do reselling all day and they're good with it because to them, they understand their priorities and they're able to work together. I think the conflict happens is when you have a family structure, when individuals in the family aren't prioritizing the same thing. Right.
So,
and
but
then it
what's
becomes an issue.
What's Grant Cardone's answer to that? Like,
Grant Cardone is basically like your family has to be on board.
what if they're not?
Then you got a problem. And I 100% agree with that because whether it's in education, I can tell you people in education that were never able to get to the next level because their spouse was not on board with it. And it didn't matter how hard they worked. It didn't matter what they did. And again, I know we talk about this victim mentality and blaming others, but I think there is a real reality when you're working with human beings that if the family structure isn't on board with what you're doing, you're not going to get to the next level. That's just it. So you got to make a choice. Are you willing to be at just that level, right? And prioritize that, hey, well, more important is, my spouse and being on board with me. And if that means I got to give a little, then you got to be willing to choose if that's what you want. Or you got to say, you know what? We got to figure this out because ultimately, and I would say Grant Cardone is right. The family structure has to understand that if this career path is what's taking care of the family has to be on board.
Yeah, to an extent. But a lot of this is, I would say a lot of this is like a me mentality. And I agree. Like my wife and I, we resell together and we're both on board with the same thing. So that's super beneficial. If she wasn't, this wouldn't work the same way. But at the same time, I hate the idea of selling. I believe he's selling the myth of you can have it all. That's what I think he's selling.
But I think here's the thing.
But let me finish my thought.
All right, go ahead.
So I think he's selling the myth of you can have it all. And the reason why I say that is you can have abundance in a lot of areas, but you cannot go all in on every area. And just my reading is a perfect example. I was doing very good for a while with doing exercises in the morning or going to the gym after work, right? When I decided that I needed to challenge myself intellectually, read some more books, I had to decide, okay, I've got to give up some time somewhere. Well, some of that time is going to come from working out. So physically, I suffer a little. There's no way I can spend 2 hours in the gym and do an hour of intense reading and work a full-time job and resell and be like a family and be able to be like fully dedicated to all those things without like any hiccups. You have to like, you have 24 hours a day and you have to allocate that time to certain things. And is it nice when like your wife and you or your husband and you are on the same page with one aspect? Yes, that's great. But then there's always going to be a cost benefit analysis or opportunity cost rather. You're always giving up something. Time you spend in one thing is time away from something else. You can't be 100% in on fitness and 100% in on family. And you know what I mean? Like you're going to have to be partially in on something and not 100%.
I would say if the person so there's two, I'm going to say something harsh here eventually. So if the person that you're with is 100% on board with you and what you do and they have the same priorities, it's not going to be an issue. It's just not going to matter. It's just not like it's not, there's never going to be a discussion like we got to give up time to do this, to do that. It's just going to naturally happen. And I've seen it happen with people. There was a stage in my life where it just naturally happened and time management was never an issue. But it's kind of like, it's kind of, I'm going to use Dave Ramsey scenario. So Dave Ramsey would talk about before you got married, right? You have to think about, okay, if you're marrying somebody that handles money poorly and you want to be financially independent and money's not an issue, Dave Ramsey would say that should be enough for you to end the relationship. It should be done. Like if somebody's coming to you and they have $100,000 debt and you have no debt and that person isn't willing to take the steps to cancel out that debt, then that relationship should end.
So what happens when you marry the person who's on board 100% financially and job-wise, but they're not on board fitness-wise, or they're not on board with your getting your master's degree. Or
But
they're
I
not on
think at
board.
that time that's when you got to make the decision what's important. Like if your spouse and your marriage is important, that's what you dedicate to. Like
yeah,
that's,
but okay, but you're saying you're dedicating to, so like, for instance, when my son came along, he requires a certain amount of time, and I refuse to not give him time every day, right? He's going to get time every day. So the idea that I can be 100% abundance, rock star dad of the year, but also be teacher of the year it's impossible.
I disagree. I think
It's
it's
impossible.
100% doable.
No.
There's the thing is, all you need is one example to cancel out that disagreement. And there's millions of people that have been great family people.
I'm not saying
and have
great.
been great at whatever occupation.
But they're giving
they're
up
supposed to do.
something. They're giving up something. There's some like, do they also have a 6-pack body? And they're like, and do they also have this? And do they also have?
But people make choices. Like,
But that's what I'm saying. Like that's time management. Eventually, you're saying like I can only pick from so many things because the amount of time that I have.
but if
So you can pick 2 or 3 maybe, but you can't pick everything.
okay, I'll just say one more thing, and we'll move on because I don't think we're gonna agree on this one at all.
Okay, tell me one person who has abundance in every spiritual, physical, family.
But that's not what
financial.
that's not what he's saying. He's saying time management is not an issue if your priorities are the same. That's it. That's all he's saying. So he's not saying in everything. And so for me, I'll put it this way. If you're an individual, right, and reselling is your thing and leveling up and Amazon, FBA or real estate, blah, blah, and you come across somebody and no matter how drop dead gorgeous they are, no matter how much you care about them, no matter what, if that person isn't on board with those same priorities, then it's time to move on. Like, that's it.
Yeah, but that's relationship advice. But
but it's the same idea.
okay. But here's direct quote from. And
You're trying
I read
to
part of
win
it.
me over. You're not going to win me over.
I'm not trying to win you over. I'm just saying like you're telling me he's not saying that, but he's saying this.
Okay.
Finances, family, happiness, spirituality, physical or emotional well-being, or if you're like me, all of them. And remember, it can be all of them. I didn't add the emphasis there. It's there. I personally am not interested in balance. I'm interested in abundance in every area. I don't think I should have to sacrifice one in favor of another.
Yeah, but you're talking about, there's no discussion of 6-packs. But can you
Physical.
but physical, what does that mean? Like, you're defining it as far as like you need to be like, I don't know, in like this tremendous shape. Maybe he's just saying you be in good health. You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's 10x.
well, to him it is. I mean, Grant Cardone, to me, according to what he says in the book, he figured out. But I'm telling you, there are plenty of people who have
They have it all.
They have it all.
They have their cake and they eat it too.
100%.
Disagree.
There are people out there. Not everybody has to be miserable and go like, oh, whoa. Like,
I'm not saying you're miserable, but you do have to, like, you only have 24 hours a day and 5 to 6 of that is sleeping, right? So you've only got, 19 hours a day. I'm sorry, you cannot do things that require 30 hours a day.
I don't know. Maybe it's, you got to apply Tim Ferriss's 4 hours. Again, I don't think we're going to agree. So we should move on. All right. Criticism is a sign of success. So you're criticizing a Grant Cardone makes him successful?
You're criticizing of somebody made fun of you for criticizing Goodwill because they're successful.
Oh, they are successful.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny that. They do a great job. I just, I'm not a fan of the store that shall not be names, pricing policy, but that's on a small scale. I mean, if you think of the bigger picture, they're definitely doing really well.
Yeah. So this chapter is haters gonna hate. That's basically what it's saying.
It's true. But it's so true because you find that in anything. I mean, again, we don't have to touch on that. I mean, I think he's just, to my sense of why he wrote that is just to say, hey, all of you that are hating on me, it's because I'm successful.
Yeah.
I think that's what he meant. Again, that's what it read like to me. All right. What about this? Let's go chapter 19. Customer satisfaction is the wrong target. How'd you feel about that there?
I mean, again, I have a problem.
Okay, what he was saying before let's explain to those people that didn't.
So Grant Cardone basically said like customer satisfaction shouldn't be the issue you're concerned about. It's customer acquisition, right? It's actually getting customers, because if you're putting all of your effort into making the customers you have happy, you never grow. And the most successful companies are worried about getting customers. But then the thing I always feel about Grant Cardone is he says something isn't the issue, but then basically he turns around and says, it's not the issue because I already have that part mastered.
100%. That's what he's saying here. He's saying it should be the standard. Customer satisfaction should already be the standard. We shouldn't even have a discussion about it.
Yeah. And basically he says, your company should take care of the customers, but more of your concern shouldn't be on like, how do we keep our customers happy, but how do we get new customers? Because if you can't get the new customers, then who cares whether or not non-customers are happy with your business?
It was kind of an interesting chapter because he's talking about the thing that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's what he's saying. Like, you should be worried more about the non-customers than the customers, with the exception that you've already taken care of the customers, and that's why you should be going after non-customers. And so I think there's value to that in the sense that if let's relate it to reselling, are there different items that you're not sourcing or you're not thinking about that could expand your business because you're keeping yourself to one niche and you're trying to keep that population happy and buying consistently, where you should already have that taken care of and you should be branching out and think about other areas. And I think there's value to that. So, hey, before we get moving though, if you haven't had a chance to check us out on YouTube, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on YouTube. And make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification. So, you know, when Mike and I get into it, you can watch our eyebrows. So also you can follow us on, that was so weird, but it's true. We get heated sometimes.
Yeah, but we're good friends.
Yeah, we're good friends. It's all good.
That's what happens.
No, that's how it should work. On Instagram, we are Pure Hustle Podcast. On TikTok, we are Pure Hustle Podcast. On Facebook, we're Pure Hustle Podcast. And you can also find us as Pure Hustle Cast on Twitter. You can always leave us a message, 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Or shoot us an email at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And always, there's a link on the bottom if you want to say, hey, thanks so much for helping us out. You know, here's a monetary way to say thank you. There's a link below to PayPal. And I'm excited about our next book. Can we talk about that real quick?
Yeah. So let me get the exact title so that I get it right. We'll put a link down in the description so you know which version we're planning on reading.
I have no idea, by the way.
So you said you're really excited about it.
I am, because I will tell you, this book was, I think, made for good conversation just because, you know, I wish Grant Cardone, if you're listening, we want you on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it made for great conversation.
Hey, maybe you can clarify some of the things that we have, you know, critiques of you, because, you know, every time we critique, it just makes you more successful. And, you know, maybe you can come on and clarify your points. And, you know, maybe we're totally wrong about some of the things we think you're saying, and maybe we were right. And, you know, we'd love to, that'd be cool. But
so we hope you're listening. Our next book.
But we got to go 10x. So we want Grant Cardone on a
10-hour podcast episode.
No, we want him as like a part-time, like, third person who comes in and like, he's like our assistant.
A special guest.
Yeah, he's our assistant.
Even when we interview people, Grant Cardone will interview those people.
Yeah, he'll come on as an assistant. Okay, so our next book is Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World by William H. McRaven. I believe he's an admiral, right? And he gave a speech at a
really
college.
Good call.
Yeah, so he gave a speech at a college ceremony, and it was like a life-changing speech for me. And I already like knew a lot of this stuff, but it's one of those things that's just kind of inspiring. And anytime I meet people who, I don't want to say don't have their life together, but just seem to be struggling to figure out what's the next step to take and how to, like, you know, make their life better, improve their life. I always just recommend them to go watch that video. And now I'm like, you know, I want to read this book because I'm sure he's going to flush out in even more detail. So I would say, as a teaser, go watch that video. It's not super short.
Can you repeat what it is again?
So it's Make Your Bed, Little Things That Can Change Your Life and Maybe the World by William H. McRaven. If you just type in Make Your Bed speech.
Is that another link we need to put below?
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
We'll have all kinds of links in the description.
It's such an incredible speech. And it really just talks about like how to, well, we'll wait till you get to the book to go overall, but really it's such a powerful book about the little things you can do and to change your mindset in order to just make your life better, to improve everything you're doing, to develop good habits, and to not be stuck in the average, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I caught a clip of Tim Ferriss talking about him.
Really?
And how it impacted him when he discussed like if you just make your bed every morning, other things will fall into place because you already feel like you conquered
something. Yep.
So I thought, again, it was Orlando going, oh, that's great. Hasn't happened, but
bed's still not made.
I mean, there was a point in my life where I made the bed for, I would say, probably 13 years. There wasn't a day I missed. And then
a time comes where, you choose something else over the time it takes to make the bed, and you don't have abundance in every area of your life.
Could be. I mean, I feel like, because I'm telling you, it was years, and then I don't know.
But it's more than just that. So make your bed is just one aspect. So don't think I make my bed, I don't have to read it.
Next time we meet, you must ask me, did I write my goals every day?
Did you make your bed?
And did I make my bed every day?
That's how we're going to start every episode. Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. We're on episode 87, or episode 194. Orlando, did you make your bed today?
I want you to ask me. I think that's a big deal.
When you call in, all of our listeners, when you call in for a hustle of the week or Bellow or something, just add that. And Orlando, did you make your bed?
We should have a make your bed.
Make your bed.
Make your bed section where we talk about how people's lives change because they made their bed.
Make your bed.
All right, let's get back to the book here. So we'll put links below for the book, for the Will Smith video, for the Admirals video, and let's 10x this book study.
All right. Omnipresence.
10x.
Let's X this 10x. Omnipresence. This is a chapter talking about being everywhere. You wanna expound on that a little bit?
Sure. I think you need to be. I mean, I'm not trying to sound, like Gary Vee or anything, but I really do feel in reselling or anything that you're doing, like you have to be wherever you can be, you should be. And I remember one of the times I learned this was I had a superintendent that I worked for. And I remember when he first got hired, he came in and he set up a meeting with the Chamber of Chamber of Commerce in the town. And I'm like, why? Like, why would you do that? We were a private institution. Like, it didn't really matter. And I remember him saying, Orlando, we need to be relevant in the community. Like, we've existed for so long, and there are businesses that have no idea who we are. And I remember at that time, like, oh, this is different. And next thing you know, we got all the support. All these people found out who we were. I mean, we were having the Chamber of Commerce meeting at our location, which brought more people to find out about our school, which allowed our enrollment, to fluctuate in a good way. And so I thought, and I was thinking about that when I read this, I go, that's right. I mean, you think about reselling, a lot of people ask us, I'm really struggling in selling on Instagram. Right? They can do the eBay, Poshmark, but what they're doing, and we've talked about this before, is they make an Instagram account and they just put items that they're selling and that's it. Right? And so there's a presence, but you know how you make that presence? By providing value. Like telling people how you do this well, or showing people these are the items to look for. And then as your following grows, then you'll get random people that go, hey, I was interested in this Instagram story you had about this item, or yeah, I saw on Twitter that you had this in your haul. I wanted to purchase it. And we have that happen. I would say probably once a week now. I have that happen on the Instagram account. And it's because, we're trying to be omnipresent, right? We're on TikTok now. We're on YouTube. We have our podcast. The only place we really weren't omnipresent was on Snap, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. And we could always do more in some of those areas, but
I think we could 10x what we do.
Yeah, but you've got to pick the social media sites that you put the most energy into. You can't put as much energy in all of them and be successful in every other way. But
I see where you're going with that.
But now this is interesting because if you're not a social media, I mean, it's easy for us to talk about in that sense of like, okay, like we have a presence on social media because of the podcast. But if you're just a reseller, okay, well, how do you have the omnipresence? Well, I think that it's important to realize every single thrift store, every single book selling person, anybody who could possibly help your business, whether it's people who have boxes, they should have your business card. They should 100%. Know who you are. And I'm listening to this book right now. I listen to audiobooks quite a bit. And there was a phrase said in there that it kind of changed the way I thought about stuff. And it was a salesman driving in a car, and he's got this young boy in the car with him. and he's giving life advice to this young boy. And he says, the one thing you need in order to be successful in life, he goes, on all my years selling, this is it. This is the one piece of advice. This will make you more successful than anything. He says, it's the love. He says, and as you listen to him explain it, you realize like, okay, this isn't real love. But he's like, love everybody. He goes, every time I get a new customer, I talk to somebody, he says, I ask them everything I could think of to ask them. You got any pets? You got a wife? How many kids? And he goes, and then I go home, or when I leave their house, and I write it all down in a book, their name, and then I write wife. And if his wife has cancer, I write next to it cancer. And then every time I see that guy again, before I
kind
sell
of like Michael Scott,
right? So before I sell him whatever it is I'm trying to sell him, I ask him about his wife, and I ask him about his kids, and I ask about. And he goes, and then when the wife dies, I cross out cancer and I write dead. And he goes, and that's nice because that's one less thing I have to think about. But as sad as that is to realize, but it's so true. Like if everybody feels that they know you, if you're everywhere and it's like, oh, here comes this person who I give boxes to, or this person that I could hook up a deal with, and they can sell me something or whatever it is. If everybody knows who you are, doors are going to open up for you. And we talk about that all the time.
Yeah. What I'll say is, yes, I mean, I've pushed business cards forever. And what I'll tell you is if you're not in a place where you're turning away deals, then you haven't done enough. That's my measure. Because right now I'm always turning away stuff, right? People are like, hey, can we connect? Hey, I got this bolo. Can we share this bolo? Or I get people like, hey, I'm selling my inventory, or, hey, I heard about you here. It's huge. And again, like Mike said, it doesn't have to be social media. It could just be business cards. It could just be when you're out at thrift stores, at garage sales. People need to know who you are, and they need to know you're a reseller. Today, Allison from Big Thrift, somebody found out they're a reseller, and she ended up with a Harley 3D emblem shirt. Right? Think about that. Like, had she never said that, wouldn't have happened.
Yep.
Right? So yes, I 100% agree. Omnipresence is a big deal.
Yep. And if you're like Grant Cardone, he says, how many people are in the world? 6 billion. I want 6 billion people to know my name.
I believe he does. I think he wants 6.8 billion, and then whatever else may be lurking out there. If there is. All right. Excuses.
This is a good one. And we could probably have a whole podcast just on excuses.
But we've talked about
it, like not making excuses for failures. Because I think the point that we've made on this and he makes here is it doesn't change your situation, right? He says making excuses won't change your situation. Only getting the real reason behind it can do this. And, sometimes things aren't your fault, but still, if you point the finger at somebody else, unless you're trying to get some kind of justice that like might be warranted, there's really no point in even bringing it up. It's like, okay, like I was wronged in this. What are the aspects I can change? Or was I at fault at anything? Okay, now what do I do moving forward? And you can't do that if you sit and wallow in excuses.
Yep. I mean, we've killed it so many times. Excuses. They're
like belly buttons.
Well, yeah. Well, there's various.
Everybody has them.
Yeah. We can also go, they're like noses. They're like this. They're like, we can go all over the place. The bottom line is you can always find someone to blame or an excuse. Ultimately, like we said, it's your responsibility to figure out how to make things happen.
Yeah. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
100%.
Going back to Will Smith.
All right, let's go to successful or unsuccessful. Chapter 22.
This was a long chapter, and this had, let's see the number.
Oh, this is the one. Okay, so on this one, I think he had like 30-something different attributes. 32. And so what we decided on this one is we're just going to pick out the ones that we believe stuck out to us or the ones that we challenged. I don't think there's many that we challenge on this one. I think
there's a few. But
okay, well we'll
just talk about a couple.
All right, so where you're at. So number one, have a can-do attitude. Okay, obviously. That's what this whole thing is about. Okay, so, but I did like what he said. He said, can do, no problem. We will handle it. Became the norm and nothing else is even accepted. And I will tell you that is the one, I'm going to go on a rant here. That is the one thing that bothers me to no end that is not in this society. Drives me mad. If I go somewhere and, even if it's, let's say, Starbucks or let's say, it's the library or it's whatever. And people are like, yeah, we can't do it. I'm like, no, like I'm a customer. Like you can do it, or at least tell me you can and try and then come back like, hey, this is what we did. This is where we landed. And I think the same thing should apply. If you're a reseller, I think the same thing should happen if you're just a human in the sense that
And all you non-humans out there.
If somebody approaches you, what you talked about love, you talk about compassion. One of the best ways you can show that is by telling people, hey, I can do what I can. I'll try to make this happen. Right? Because to me, I remember this, and this is something I really had to break through, because I was the guy that people would go like, especially as an administrator, I didn't have a lot of fans at times because people would approach me and I'm like, nope. And like, imagine how demoralizing that is for a person.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a customer and they're approaching, if you're, whatever business you're doing, you got to at least have that can-do attitude that, yes, I can make this happen. It should be the norm for you. And then the exception should be when it's an absolutely, or maybe it shouldn't if it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Go to Grant Cardone.
No, there will be times when you can't. And I think what I learned in my short time of management, but I think even being a teacher, you're managing students and their expectations and feelings, and you're managing parents. So there's still management as far as that goes. Is when you can't do something for whatever reason, or the decision you're making, even parenting, right? Like sometimes you can't explain to your kids the whole reason why they can't do something, but be as transparent as possible, right? Like sometimes there's sensitive information you can't talk about, but I know I appreciate when my bosses say like, hey, I hear what you're saying. I either agree or maybe I understand what you're saying. These are the things that are happening behind the scenes, or there are things happening behind the scenes that we can't change, and it's affecting in this way, but we believe that it will lead us to a better place and reach our goals, right? Like when there's transparency and it's not just the no and cut off, then you don't feel like you're heard. But when a customer feels heard, and when you're transparent of the reasons why, right? Like if a customer says, can you ship this via this? And you're like, hey, I'm sorry, this violates eBay policy. Like I wish I could do it that way, but I can't. That's better than just the no, right?
Mm-hmm. No, agreed.
Cool. I'm going to jump ahead a few. There's a lot of really good ones in here. I'm going to jump to number 10.
Wow.
Number 10 was create wealth. I thought this one was really interesting because he separates the idea of money as an asset versus wealth. And we've talked before, like wealth being like accumulated assets when we were talking about Richest Man in Babylon. But when he's talking wealth here, he's talking a broader sense of other types of wealth, such as like intellectual property and other value that you provide. He says the very successful know that money is already created. They think in terms of generating wealth through the exchange of new ideas, products, services, and solutions. And so I like the idea of don't just think of like, how can I make more money? But how can I create things that improve other people's lives? How can I create?
So we're creating a course, our PRSO podcast course. We'll be releasing that. I'm joking. It's not happening. Sorry. But but that's what he's saying though. Yeah. I mean, he's setting himself up for his sale, his courses and his services that he provides. But I think there is value to that. I think there comes a place where if you are good at something, and again, we're not going to do this, but I remember when I've done consulting in the past, it's a sense of like, if you are good at something, you got to think about, okay, how can I market and how can I network this? And the advice I will give is don't sell yourself short.
Yeah. But this isn't just like creating courses. Like this is like create a new idea, be an innovator in a field. And so that's part of wealth too. And even he kind of talks about like, when you're developing that kind of money and you have that kind of stuff, like maybe it's a legacy you're trying to leave by like, I want to help an orphanage in this country that, is underprivileged and they need help. And like, I'm going to develop wealth, even though like the amount of money that's in the world doesn't change. But if I can increase the living status of these orphans, then I've done something, right? Like, so that is a way you can create wealth is
of all the scenarios.
Well, that's the extreme, the example that people use, right? Just like you say, starving kids in whatever country, right? Like, so wealth can be created by new ideas, a new way of growing plants that can help whatever. You haven't actually made more money, but think of any product. Like there's no multi-millionaire business person who made their money by not creating wealth for everybody, right? The iPhone has changed it's made everybody more productive.
It's all about value. Yep. All right. So building on that, I went to 15, focus on the now. And I did like what he said here because I think we've touched on this, but I think we haven't expounded on it enough. So he says on page 172, he discusses action is necessary and there's no time more valuable than now. While others are trying to figure out how they will get something done, you will have already finished it. The person who continues to do more consistently will improve his or her skill set out of sheer survival and adjustment. And so I take this back to our last episode where we had talked about retail arbitrage, and you said that you were, you went on forums and people were like, you can't do it, and watch out for this and da-da-da. And it's the same thing with Amazon, right? Amazon can be super scary. And, there's a lot of hammers that can drop and there's just a lot of fear out there. But here's the thing. It's like anything. I truly believe in, and when I've been at my best was when I just said, I'm going to go into something and I'm going to survive and adjust as I go along. Because thinking about it and sitting back and going, I don't know about this. I'm kind of concerned. I'm kind of worried. You're just not going to do it. You're just not. But if you go, hey, I'll figure this out as I go, is a far better place. And I can tell you in all kinds of fields, whether it's reselling, I can tell you in education, the schools that have made it have been the schools that will say, and I'm talking about, both public education and private education that decided to be innovative and said, you know what, we're going where others haven't gone, but we're going to adjust as we go instead of like thinking we have it all figured out. And I got to tell you, 100%, I've seen the people that have been willing to go and adjust are far better than the people that go, you know what, this is the way we've always done it. We're going to keep it this way. That's how businesses, in my opinion, have died. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents. So I agree with Grant Cardone on this one.
That's a good one. I'm going to jump back just a little bit, and then I only have one more after this one that I kind of, there's quite a few I disagreed with, but one that really kind of irked me was habitually commit. And I didn't like that one.
What number was that?
Number 13. Okay. I didn't like this one because the point he's trying to make, and he actually says it a couple of times throughout this whole chapter in different sections, but is say yes basically to every opportunity. And anytime you're asked from somebody to do something, it's basically say yes. And the habitually commit, I'm not a fan of, because I would say for me personally, and I've read multiple things from very successful people who say the exact opposite, saying no is very challenging for a lot of people. Saying no is very hard for me to do because I'm a people pleaser. But I have learned that stepping out of my comfort zone and saying no has been one of the most powerful, life-changing things in my life. Because every time somebody offers you an opportunity, hey, can you do this job for me? Can you do this thing? Hey, can you help me move? Hey, can you come over? We got a kid's birthday party. Eventually you're going to become overwhelmed with yeses. And then you're not all in on anything. Mm-hmm. You're not able to commit to the things that are more important, like reselling or whatever it is. And so years ago, I heard somebody say this thing, and it was like, this is my model now, is if somebody says like, hey, will you want to do this thing? If it's an opportunity, like I'm not talking like a friend says, hey, I need your help, like something happened in my family and can you give me a ride? Like, of course, be compassionate. But when it's like, hey, I've got this opportunity, like, do you want to, I know you already have a podcast. You want to do another podcast with me? Or like whatever it is. I mean, I've had somebody reach out to me about doing a radio show with them. And my indicator is if it's not almost instantly 100%, yes, I cannot like imagine my life without this thing, I'm going to say no. Unless, because it's so easy to like stretch yourself. If I've said yes to every single video gig or like extra like podcast, radio thing, whatever it is, we wouldn't be doing Pierre's podcast right now.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean? And so like saying no has been so helpful for me. And so I think you got to be smart about it. But I think a good rule of thumb, at least that I do when it comes to opportunities, is if it's not 100%, yes, this is it, like I'm all in, probably you should say no.
So passion, right? That's what you're saying is passion.
I'm not, well, I mean, again, I'm not a big follower of like passion in the sense of like, it has to be like this emotional thing. But like if I'd run the numbers and I'm like, yes, this makes sense. Like this is going to provide me X benefit. I'm just very logical. I mean, everybody has a different way of thinking. For me, it's not, I don't run off emotions almost ever. I run almost completely off of like thoughts. That is my passion. Right. So like when somebody comes to me with something, like I'll get passionate about it, but my passion follows all of the logic, right? The logic comes first for me. And so if it's not like, yes, this is going to be beneficial, or I see that this is going to be able to help somebody or whatever it is, then yeah, I'm probably going to say no, or at least like, let me think about it. But it's so easy to be like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah. And that was my go-to for the longest time. And you remember, like, when I was at the school underneath you, I said yes to every video opportunity. I said yes to every, and eventually you get to the place where it's like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. There should have been something I should have just stood up and said, you know what? No, not unless I get X, Y, and Z, which is going to help me with this. I'm not just going to say yes because it's like, oh, I want to please them. You know, I don't want them to think bad about me.
Mike was very worried about what I thought. He always said yes,
not
though.
This guy.
No, but
I was a yes man, and that was never a good thing for me.
But you know, I think there's a way to be a yes person, in the sense that, and it's kind of what you're saying. You know, I think about like our podcast. So any opportunity that's come up, pretty much we've said yes to.
Right.
There's a couple times that people said, hey, it'd be great if you interview this person or this person. And we just thought, well, it doesn't really fit our brand. And so we said no. Right. Because in the end, we didn't think it would be advantageous for the podcast or help our listeners or whatever. It would have been more advantageous for that individual and so on. But I do think there has to become a place where you just say, you know, at this stage in life or at this stage, whatever I'm doing, whether it's you're doing a YouTube or a podcast or reselling or whatever, that you have to consistently say yes. So there, I think there is some truth to that, but yes, you can't say yes to everything. So we got to land somewhere.
And I would say being
just our opinion,
being willing to say no, like just try it. Like it is hard. When somebody comes to you, especially if it's like you don't want to let your boss down, you don't want them to think like, oh, maybe they're not a team player, whatever it is. But being willing to say like, no, I'm not going to do that this weekend. I have something else that, you know, if you can do that, it's so hard to do. But the more you do it, the more you're like, you know what? I'm in charge of my own life and my own. It's empowering.
All right, I want to jump to 23. Be interested in results.
I like it.
I think this is huge. And, you know, right now, you know, it's so funny because I want to go a podcast without saying Gary Vee, but I think there's value when he talks about eighth place trophies. I think this falls in line with this whole thinking because there's a mentality out there that, hey, as long as you work hard, you should be rewarded. But if you work hard at something and you do, and it's not, you know, what it's supposed to be, or it's not accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish, then you shouldn't be rewarded. That's it. You know, I kind of think about one of the worst things that I think happened to my son. Not the worst. Okay, I'm speaking in extremes. But I'll never forget. And, you know, he was playing soccer and they got to the championship. And they should have won. And they lost. And they had this whole ceremony, like rewarding them and a photo shoot and blah, blah. And these kids are like bawling their eyes out. And I'm like, why are you doing this to these kids? Like, let them feel the loss. Let them feel terrible. Because that's what's going to get them to the next level next year, to make sure that they don't see what happens. They got complacent and they got to the championship and they got schooled. And I remember sitting there and going, this is terrible. Like I really, or I'll never forget watching and you might disagree. I don't know. Let us know in the comments. Watching his coach cheer on the other team when they scored. And I'm like, stop it. Do not do that. That is terrible. Like, who are you? You sell out. Get off the field. Right? It just bothered me so much. And I think we got to get past this whole, I worked hard or I hustled and I hustled and I hustled, so therefore I should be rewarded. No. Like, I'll give you an example. Last Q4, I hustled and I hustled and I hustled. Guess what? I got rewarded, but I didn't get rewarded as much as I should have based on the hours that I put in. And why? Because I didn't do things right. There's some things I didn't have figured out. Now, this Q4, I intend to put in more hustle and I expect better results because I believe I figured things out that I should have had figured out last year. But results are what matter, not the amount of work you put in. I feel like I'm just on this diatribe right now, but I am so passionate about this because, you know, we get DMs all the time. It's like, hey, you guys, like I put in 30 hours last week and I sourced all these items and I listed. And I'm like, well, you know, and I won't say this in the DM, but I'll say this because this is in general. Like, okay, did you source trash? Did you source things? Did you research? Did you look at comps? Did you do everything to make sure that item was something that should have sold, or your pictures are good, or what's your policy? Dare I say, are you doing promoted listings? Like, are you doing everything? Hey, on Amazon, did you make sure that, Amazon wasn't on the listing? How many sellers were on there? Blah, 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 blah. And I can go on and on and on. And so when he says unsuccessful individuals attach great importance to the time they spend at work and their attempts at getting results. So true. Because ultimately it doesn't matter as much as it cuts to the core. When you work, 60, 80 hours a week and you didn't make as much as you thought you would, like that sucks.
Yep.
But it's reality.
Yep.
Right. And then when it says, even if nothing happens, the difference here is connected to the concept of being unreasonable. Let's face it, like it or not, the results are all that matter. 100%.
Yep.
Do not think that the amount of work should equal, the amount of results.
The market doesn't have feelings.
It doesn't have feelings. Orlando right now has no feelings.
Your feeler got broke. You had one feeler left and now it's broken.
It's hard because in education, we saw it all the time, right? Hey, I spent 20 hours on this research paper. Well, yeah, but
it's not good.
It wasn't good. I'm sorry. It's not the grade. You didn't do the work.
Yep.
You didn't do the work. You put in the work. You didn't do the right work.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. So in business, I would say in family relationships, in everything, like you could work your tail off and still fail. So you got to make sure, you put in the right work.
I like it.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to jump towards the end here to my favorite one. Number 32, be disciplined.
Wow. Okay. But I had a couple more. Can we go a couple more?
You can go back,
okay.
But be disciplined. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this because we've talked about all of these things so much, but I'm a firm believer that discipline is more important 100% of the time than passion, because passion ebbs and flows. And some people are lucky enough to have so much passion that they're disciplined in the things, but it's the discipline in the little things, and it's the discipline in the stuff they're doing that makes them successful, right? Like Michael Jordan might have been passionate about basketball, but it's the fact that he was disciplined to shoot 100 free throws every day after practice. I'm pretty sure that was him.
It was
Maybe
more than that,
else,
but yeah.
right?
No, Dominic Wilkins has a similar story. I mean, there's plenty of people out there.
So that's the point I'm trying to make is passion is great, but if you don't have the discipline to actually do the thing, you're not going to succeed. And the beautiful thing about discipline is even if you're like, you know what, I don't have the passion at the moment, if you are disciplined and you do the thing, eventually either you become passionate about it or you become successful and you become passionate about the success, right? So discipline you can control, passion you can't, because there might be times you're like, I'm just not in it today. I don't feel like going to the gym.
Repeat that.
But I'm going to go.
That's good.
I don't know if I can repeat it the same way.
No.
Hit the 30-second rewind.
It's passion you can't control, discipline you can.
Yeah.
That's true. It's so, as much as I hate saying that's true, it's true.
Yeah, because last episode you fought against me on that.
Well, I still do. I still think passion should definitely drive you, but you need discipline to get you through those gaps.
Yep.
All right. So I just wanted to touch on 27, be highly ethical. I like that. I really like the way he put this because, and I'll just read it real quick and I'll just expound on it. He said, I know people who would never tell a lie or steal a penny who I don't consider ethical. I'm like, wow, where's he going with this? Right? Because they also don't bother to fulfill their families and friends. They don't bother to fulfill their commitments as providers of security and role models for their families and friends. If you don't go to work every day and do everything within your power to succeed, then you're stealing from your family, future, and the company for which you work. Whoa. Mic drop. And that's huge. And again, I think this relates to Pure Hustle Podcast through and through. Like, ultimately, we're responsible for ourselves and we're responsible for those that we're supposed to take care of, right? Whether that be our spouse. And I'm not saying that spouse doesn't have a say in it. Like that spouse 100% should be committed with you in doing that. But when it comes to kids, you have the responsibility. And again, I'm not saying spoil those kids. I'm saying, raise them up in a way that they understand like what hard work and what he's talking about here, being ethical about providing and so on. So,
well, being a role model, I mean, that's one of the things it says there, right? Like that could be part of it, could be work, but part of it could be a lot of things. Like one thing that I've been thinking a lot of is this idea of like cowardice, like how often it is that it's so easy to be, and I know that's a harsh word, and like people like kind of shrink back from words like that today, but like how easy it is to like he's talking about ethically here, to like if somebody says something that you are fundamentally against, to kind of not speak out against it, or to not stand up and say, you know what, this thing in culture, this thing, like it's wrong. And like to show your family, like I stand for this thing. And it's really easy for people to kind of like back down and not stand up. So your kids might hear you talking about something, but then when you're confronted with it, they see you back down from it.
Oh, that's the worst. I mean, I've seen that happen with my own family. I've done it myself where I'm like,
yeah, I'm guilty. It happens all the time.
Yeah. You feel terrible. Yeah. It's a terrible feeling, but it's so true. And again, we always say this, like, again, you shouldn't be worried about what people think about you, but there needs to be a time and a place where you go, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I do whatever it takes to make it happen.
Integrity. Right? And he talked earlier about name, right? Like with the whole like being omnipresent, name meaning something. And he says his dad said like, nobody can take away your name. But I think what he was really getting at, or I think what we're getting at here with the ethical thing, is your integrity. Like people, if somebody thinks bad, if they think badly about you, but you are standing up for your morals, your virtues, you're consistent, all of those things, and you know you're good, and your family can look at you and say like, hey, people can think whatever they want, but this guy or this girl has stood up for what they believed in. They've worked hard, they've provided, they've when they've made mistakes, they've owned it, they've apologized, whatever it is. When they see that and you've got your integrity, it doesn't matter what, Sam Yahoo or whatever thinks on the street thinks about you. Like what matters is what you know about yourself, because integrity is what you do when nobody's looking, and that can't be taken away. You can be falsely accused, you can be in prison wrongly and still have your integrity. And that's something that can't be taken away if you have it. If you don't have it, well,
then it can be.
You don't have it to be taken away. So I guess the thing is here, have some integrity, and that's hard to do. Yeah.
But again, relating to business, like ultimately, and we'll end on this note, you got to do what works. So if 10Xing is definitely something that you're on board with and you can make it happen, then do it. If you got a 3X it, right? And Mike had talked about 10%. So 1 exit or 2 exit, right? Which listen, 10X, and maybe I'm backtracking a little bit, but 10X, like what does that mean? That's huge, right? At the rate I'm at right now, I feel that I'm not 10Xing it. And if I 10X'd it, there probably wouldn't be a podcast, right? I wouldn't be I would just be 100, I don't know, 1,000% reselling.
Why not? You can have abundance in both areas.
Yeah, but we do. We're reselling and we have the podcast.
Yeah, you can have 10X of both.
Listen, okay. Let's not end on that note. All I will say is, hey, listen, I do think it's a book worth reading. I think it's worth your time to spend and going, these are things to think about. These are things that, I can apply. And these are things that, maybe I need to live a little bit more life and then figure it out a few years later.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's, I appreciate you guys sticking with us with part 3 of the Level Up review.
Yeah, I've got one more quote.
Oh, you got one more?
Just,
okay.
Not one of the things, but this is like kind of how he ends his book. And I thought it was pretty good. He says, look around you and you will see the world filled with average people, average thinking, and at best, average actions. Take another look. What you will really see behind this acceptance of average are people who have given up on their dreams and who cease to live with a dynamic purpose. They are instead willing to settle for whatever their estimation of normal is. When you're choosing the people whom you will learn from, look for the exceptional, those who stand out because of the way they approach their lives.
That's great. And with that, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling.
10Xing.
Peace.